In a mansion brimming with memories and silences, an elderly woman begins to be emotionally erased by those she loves most. Her son's unexpected return unearths revelations hidden by years of abandonment and manipulation. What seemed to be a welcoming home reveals itself as a space of pain and neglect, where the shadows of the past must be confronted. This family's transformation becomes a profound lesson about love, guilt, and redemption. If this story has piqued your interest, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching us from. We continue. I promise this will be the best story you'll ever hear in your life. The afternoon was lazily settling over Belgravia, an affluent district of London, where mansions rose like fortresses of concrete and glass, guarding secrets behind high walls and electronic gates. The black Audi parked in front of the gate of house number 847, and Gabriel Morrison switched off the engine with a tired sigh. 2 weeks travelling on business through the countryside had left marks on his 42-year-old face, wrinkles of worry that hadn't been there before. He looked at the imposing facade of the house where he had grown up, where every brick carried memories of a happy childhood, of family Sundays, of laughter echoing through the spacious corridors. The 3-story mansion, with its classic architecture and impeccably maintained gardens, had always been synonymous with warmth. But at that moment, as the gate opened automatically, Gabriel felt something different, an inexplicable tightness in his chest, as if the house was no longer the same. He hadn't announced his return today. The meeting in Manchester had ended earlier than expected, and he had decided to hit the road back to the capital without telling Renee, his wife. Perhaps he wanted to surprise her, or perhaps he just longed for a moment of peace before resuming his frantic routine. As he entered through the main door, silence enveloped him like a shroud. It wasn't the tranquil silence of a resting house, but something denser, almost palpable. Gabriel left his briefcase in the entrance hall, his eyes scanning the surroundings. Everything was impeccable, as always. The marble floor gleamed, the floral arrangements were fresh in the crystal vases, the paintings on the walls perfectly aligned, but life was missing. Where was his mother? Mrs. Eleanor always greeted him at the door, no matter the time. She had a sixth sense for her children's arrival, as if she knew exactly when Gabriel would cross that gate. But today, nothing. Only the silence and the distant ticking of the antique clock in the hallway. Gabriel walked towards the kitchen, his steps echoing on the cold floor. It was then that he found Mary Grace, the housekeeper who had worked in the house for over 20 years. She was by the sink, washing dishes with mechanical movements, and when she saw him, a visible start ran through her body. "Mr. Morrison, you've arrived early," she said, quickly drying her hands on her apron. Her voice trembled slightly, and her eyes couldn't meet his gaze. "Mary, where is my mother?" Gabriel asked, and noticed how the simple question made the woman flinch. "Mrs. Eleanor is in her room, sir. She hasn't been coming down much lately." "What do you mean, hasn't been coming down?" Gabriel frowned, his concern growing. "Is she ill? Why wasn't I told?" Mary Grace opened her mouth, but no words came out. Her nervous fingers fiddled with the hem of her apron, and Gabriel had known the woman long enough to know when. She was hiding something. "Mary, what's going on here?" Before she could answer, a feminine voice cut through the air like a blade. "Gabriel, darling, you're back." Renee emerged from the living room, impeccable as ever. At 35, she was the kind of woman who attracted attention wherever she went. Perfectly brushed blonde hair, discreet but flawless makeup, designer clothes that accentuated her slender figure. She approached with a smile, but Gabriel noticed that the smile didn't reach her eyes. "The meeting ended early," he replied, watching as Mary Grace discreetly moved away, disappearing towards the back of the house. "I was asking Mary about my mother. Why doesn't she come down anymore?" Renee shrugged, a calculatedly casual gesture. "Oh, darling, you know how your mother is. She's been melancholy, prefers to stay in her room. I try to cheer her up, but you know Mrs. Eleanor, stubborn as a mule." "She was never one to be reclusive," Gabriel insisted, feeling his unease grow. "I'm going up to see her." Renee's hand rested on his arm, her fingers closing with a firm pressure disguised as affection. "She's resting now, love. She had a difficult night, finally fell asleep a little while ago." It would be a shame to wake her. Gabriel looked at the staircase leading to the second floor where his mother's room was. Something wasn't right. He could feel it, a wrong vibration in the air, like a dissonant musical note in a symphony. "Renee, how long has my mother not been coming down?" "I don't know, darling, a few days perhaps," she replied, already moving away towards the living room. "You must be exhausted from your trip. I've prepared your favorite whiskey. Come relax a bit before dinner." But Gabriel didn't move. His eyes remained fixed on the staircase, and an old memory flashed through his mind. His mother, Mrs. Eleanor, had always been the soul of that house. After his father passed away 15 years ago, a victim of a heart problem, she had taken the reins of everything. She managed the house with a firm but loving hand, participated in his business decisions, was his most trusted advisor. When Julia, his first wife, had passed away during childbirth along with their baby 5 years ago, Mrs. Eleanor had been his safe harbor. She had comforted him in the deepest pain he had ever felt, the kind that tore at his chest and stole the air from his lungs. Julia and he had been married for only 2 years, and the pregnancy was celebrated as the greatest joy of their lives. But an unexpected complication during labor had taken everything away in a matter of hours. The wife he loved and the son he barely knew. Mrs. Eleanor had also suffered immensely. She loved Julia like the daughter she never had, and the prospect of being a grandmother filled her with joy. The double loss shook their foundations, and for months the mansion was plunged into a heavy, silent mourning. It was during this dark period that Renee appeared in his life, a friend of friends present at a business dinner. She was everything life at that moment wasn't: vibrant, full of energy, with a smile that lit up rooms. Gabriel allowed himself to be carried away by the novelty, by the possibility of escaping the pain that consumed him. 6 months later, they married in a discreet ceremony. He remembered his mother's expression on their wedding day. She smiled, hugged Renee, wished them happiness, but there was something in her eyes, a shadow of concern, that Gabriel preferred to ignore. After all, nothing would be the same. No one would replace Julia. But life had to go on. Wasn't that what everyone said? Gabriel shook his head, pushing away the memories. He turned his attention to the present, to that house that was too silent, to his mother's inexplicable absence. "I'll just check on her," he said, placing his foot on the first step of the staircase. "Gabriel!" Renee called him, and there was a note of urgency in her voice that made him pause. "She really needs to rest. The doctor was categorical about it." "What doctor? When?" Gabriel turned to face her. "Last week, darling, while you were away, he said your mother is suffering from stress. She needs rest." "And why didn't anyone call me to tell me this?" "We didn't want to worry you during your business trip. You already have so much to worry about." Gabriel studied his wife's face, looking for signs of sincerity or deception, but Renee was a smooth, impenetrable wall. He felt the weariness weigh on his shoulders. Perhaps he was overreacting. Perhaps his mother really was just tired, needing rest. "All right," he conceded, stepping down from the stair. "But I'll see her later when she wakes up." "Of course, darling." Renee smiled, and this time the smile seemed genuine. "Now come, let's enjoy you being home." She guided him to the living room, where indeed a glass of whiskey was waiting, with the exact amount of ice he preferred. Gabriel sat on the Italian leather sofa, but his eyes wandered around the room. There were subtle changes. The painting his mother loved so much, a countryside landscape painted by a local artist, was no longer above the fireplace. In its place, a modern and abstract work he didn't recognize. Renee followed his gaze. "You like it?" "I had it changed. That old painting was so faded it no longer matched the decor." Gabriel didn't answer. He took a sip of the whiskey, feeling the amber liquid burn his throat. But the sensation didn't bring the expected comfort. Something was deeply wrong in that house. He could feel it in his bones. And before the night ended, he would find out what. Outside, the sun finally hid behind the buildings, casting long shadows over the garden. And on the second floor, behind a closed door, Mrs. Eleanor remained silent, as she had been for weeks, invisible in her own home. The night slowly advanced, and Gabriel couldn't relax. Sitting at the dinner table, he pushed the food around his plate with no real interest, while Renee prattled on about trivialities, about a new collection from a French designer, about a trip she was planning for the next month. He replied in monosyllables, his mind stuck on the second floor, with the mother he hadn't seen in 2 weeks, and who, according to everyone, was reclusive. After dinner, Renee excused herself, saying she had an important call to make. Gabriel seized the opportunity. He climbed the stairs with determined steps, his heart accelerating with each one. The second-floor hallway was dim, only a discreet light illuminating the way. He approached his mother's bedroom door and knocked lightly. "Mother, it's me, Gabriel." Silence. He turned the doorknob and pushed the door open. The room was dark, only the hallway light allowing a glimpse inside. Gabriel fumbled along the wall until he found the switch. The light revealed an impeccably tidy but empty room. The bed was made, the pillows aligned, no sign that anyone had slept there recently. A chill ran down his spine. If his mother wasn't there, where on earth was she? "Gabriel!" Renee's voice sounded behind him, making him turn abruptly. "What are you doing?" "Looking for my mother. You said she was resting in her room." "And she was earlier. She must have woken up and gone somewhere else in the house." "What other place?" Gabriel felt his irritation grow. "This is her house, Renee. She should be wherever she wants." "And she is, darling," Renee approached, her voice acquiring a condescending tone. "You're overreacting. Your mother is an adult woman. She comes and goes as she pleases." "Then why did Mary seem so scared when I asked about her? Why did you try to stop me from coming up?" "I didn't try to stop anything. I just said she was resting." Renee crossed her arms, the mask of a devoted wife beginning to crack slightly. "Frankly, Gabriel, I think you're paranoid." He studied his wife's face for a long moment, looking for something in her eyes that could reassure him, but all he found was a cold wall. Without saying another word, Gabriel left the room and began to search the other rooms. On the second floor, the library empty, the office empty, the old guest room empty. He went to the third floor, where smaller rooms and his mother's old sewing room were located. All empty. Unease turned into panic. He ran down the stairs and went to look for Mary Grace. He found her in the laundry room, folding towels with trembling hands. Seeing him, she almost dropped the fabric. "Mary, where does my mother eat? Where does she spend her time?" The housekeeper swallowed hard, her eyes welling up. "Mr. Morrison, Speak, Mary, for God's sake." "She receives her. Meals in her room, sir. She hasn't come down for weeks." "But the room was empty." Mary Grace clutched the towel between her fingers, visibly struggling with something. "It's not her usual room, sir. She's in the East Wing room." "The East Wing?" Gabriel's eyes widened. That part of the house was practically abandoned. They were old rooms no one had used for years. Why on earth would my mother be there? Before Mary could answer, Renee appeared at the laundry room door, her face a mask of contained fury. "Mary, you are dismissed. Go home now." The housekeeper stared at her, surprised. "But madam, my shift only ends at 10. I said now." Renee practically spat the words. Mary Grace looked at Gabriel, pleading in her eyes, but he was focused on his wife. "No, she's not. Mary stays. And you are going to explain to me right now what is happening in this house." The tension in the air was palpable. Renee took a deep breath, composing herself. "Very well, let's talk, but in private." She guided him back to the living room, closing the doors behind them. Gabriel faced her, arms crossed, waiting. "Your mother is going through a difficult time," Renee began, her voice carefully modulated. "After we got married, she started exhibiting strange behaviors. Jealousy, possessiveness, attempts to sabotage me. My mother was never like that." "People change, Gabriel. She didn't accept another woman occupying the place she believed was solely hers. I tried to talk. I was patient, but she became hostile. The doctor recommended she have her own space, where she could calm down." "That's absurd." Gabriel felt anger boil. "You isolated her in the abandoned rooms of the East Wing, is that it? Who the hell do you think you are?" "I am your wife," Renee retorted, her eyes flashing. "And all I did was protect this family. Your mother was causing constant conflicts, poisoning the atmosphere. I tried everything, but she repeatedly rejected me. I'm going to get her right now." No, you're not. Renee blocked his path. She's undergoing treatment, Gabriel. If you interrupt now, it could cause a serious setback. Get out of my way. His voice was low, dangerous. Renee hesitated, but finally moved aside. Gabriel climbed the stairs again, this time towards the east wing. The corridor there was narrower, less lit. He opened door after door, until in one of them, finally, he found his mother. Mrs. Eleanor was sitting in an old armchair by the window, wrapped in a wool shawl despite the warmth. Her grey hair, always so well kept, was tied in a loose bun. She looked smaller, more fragile, as if she had shrunk. Hearing the door open, she turned slowly. "Gabriel." Her voice was a thread. He crossed the room in 2 strides and knelt beside her, taking her hands. They were ice cold. "Mother, what are they doing to you?" Mrs. Eleanor looked at her son with tired eyes, so tired. "I tried to tell you, Gabriel, but you were always busy, always traveling. Tell me what? Tell me everything." She took a deep breath, as if gathering strength. "When you brought Renee home, I tried to accept her. I knew you needed to move on after Julia. But little by little, I realized she didn't want to be part of this family. She wanted to replace everything, to erase our past." "What do you mean, erase?" "She started by taking down Julia's photos, saying it was painful for you to see them. Then it was the furniture, the paintings, everything that had history. When I protested, she said I was being too sentimental, that the house needed renovation." Gabriel listened in silence, the knot in his stomach tightening. "Then she started to push me away from you," Mrs. Eleanor continued, her voice choked. "She said I was too controlling, that you needed space. Whenever I tried to talk to you about business, as we used to, she intervened. The decisions I used to make about the house became hers. I was being pushed to the margins like an old piece of furniture that's no longer useful. Why didn't you insist? Why didn't you look for me? I tried, son, but you were different, distant, and I understood you were dealing with your own pain. I didn't want to be an additional burden." "You would never be a burden." Gabriel felt tears sting his eyes. "One day, when I questioned one of her decisions about firing an old housekeeper, Renee exploded. She said this house was hers now, that I should accept my place or withdraw. That's when she suggested I stay in this wing, to have my privacy." "And you accepted?" Mrs. Eleanor smiled sadly. "What else could I do, Gabriel? I was exhausted from fighting. And part of me thought maybe she was right, maybe I was outdated, maybe it was time to let you build your new life." Gabriel pulled his mother into a tight hug, feeling her tremble in his arms. How could he have been so blind, so absent, so cowardly? He had fled to work, to trips, to anything that would distance him from the painful memories of Julia, and in the process, he had abandoned the only person who had always been by his side. "Forgive me, Mother," he murmured. "Forgive me. For not seeing, for not being here." "You're here now," she replied, caressing his face. "That's what matters. Let's get out of here." Gabriel stood up, extending his hand. "You're going back to your room, where you always should have been." "But Renee?" "Renee doesn't give orders in this house anymore." He helped his mother up, and together they walked down the corridor. As they reached the top of the stairs, they found Renee waiting, arms crossed, her expression icy. "This is a mistake, Gabriel. The only mistake was allowing you to do this to her." "You'll regret this," Renee hissed. "The only thing I regret is having been blind for so long." He walked down the stairs with his mother, ignoring Renee's furious glares. That night would mark the beginning of a profound change, Gabriel knew. The battle was just beginning, but he wouldn't run away anymore. Not this time. The following days were as tense as a rope about to snap. Gabriel moved Mrs. Eleanor back into her original room, the spacious and bright room overlooking the garden, with its high windows and the view of the jabuticaba trees she herself had planted decades ago. He called a trusted doctor, Dr. Arthur, who had known the family for years and examined Mrs. Eleanor thoroughly. The diagnosis was disturbing: mild malnutrition, dehydration, signs of prolonged stress, and social isolation. Nothing that couldn't be reversed with proper care, but the doctor was clear that a few more weeks in those conditions could have serious consequences. "How did this happen right under my nose?" Gabriel grumbled, running his hands over his face. "You were absent," Dr. Arthur replied with his usual frankness, "and when one is absent, all doors are open to silent abuses." Renee denied everything. She maintained that Mrs. Eleanor had chosen isolation, that she had merely respected her mother-in-law's decision. But Gabriel was no longer a fool. He began to ask questions, to investigate, and each answer left him more shocked by his own blindness. Mary Grace, now protected by Gabriel's constant presence, began to speak, at first with fear, then with a courage that came from the relief of finally being able to tell the truth. "Mr. Morrison, Mrs. Renee changed everything in this house," Mary revealed one afternoon as they prepared tea for Mrs. Eleanor. "At first they were small things. She changed the menus, claiming that Mrs. Eleanor needed a healthier diet. But the portions kept getting smaller. Then she started controlling meal times, always at moments that made it difficult for me to be present." "And you didn't say anything?" Gabriel asked, no accusation in his voice, just trying to understand. "I tried, sir, but I was threatened. Mrs. Renee made it clear that any complaint would result in immediate dismissal. And you know I need this job. I have 3 children to raise alone." Gabriel felt guilt tighten his chest. How many people had been silenced by the fear of losing their livelihood? There was more. Mary recounted how Renee gradually alienated Mrs. Eleanor's friends, phone calls that weren't passed on, visits that were discouraged with excuses about Mrs. Eleanor not being well, not receiving visitors. The matriarch, already emotionally shaken by the situation, began to believe that she really was a burden, that people preferred her absence. The psychological control was meticulous and devastating. Renee had a knack for making seemingly innocent comments that corroded Mrs. Eleanor's self-esteem. "What a beautiful dress, too bad it's out of fashion. You used to be so decisive. Now you seem lost. Gabriel is so much happier now that he doesn't have family pressures." Each phrase was a drop of poison, and accumulated, they formed an ocean of insecurity. One morning, Gabriel found his mother in the garden, for the first time in weeks. She was by the oldest jabuticaba tree, running her fingers over the rough bark of the tree. "I planted this tree when you were born," she said softly. "Your father said it would be a symbol, that it would grow strong just like you." Gabriel joined her, both in shared silence. "And it grew, Mother, thanks to you and Father." Mrs. Eleanor smiled sadly. "You know, son, what hurt me most wasn't the physical isolation. It was realizing that I was becoming invisible. My opinions stopped mattering. My presence stopped making a difference. It's a terrible feeling, to be erased from your own life. You were never invisible to me, but you weren't here to see." The truth of those words cut deep. Gabriel hugged his mother, silently vowing that he would never again allow her to feel that way. Inside the house, Renee watched from the living room window, her face a mask of contained fury. Her carefully constructed plan was crumbling. 3 years of patient work, of subtle manipulation, of strategic positioning, all threatened by her husband's sudden presence. She had calculated everything. Gabriel was predictable in his patterns of emotional escape, always traveling, always too busy to notice what was happening at home. Renee had taken advantage of every absence to tighten the siege on Mrs. Eleanor, to take control of every aspect of the mansion, to establish herself as the true mistress of that empire of bricks and memories. It wasn't about love, it never was. Gabriel was a means to an end, a gateway to a life of luxury and power that Renee had always desired, but never achieved by her own means. Daughter of a failed family from the countryside, she had learned early that beauty and sharp intelligence were her only weapons, and she had used both with mastery. She met Gabriel at a strategic point in his life, when he was vulnerable from recent pain. It was easy to become what he needed at that moment, the opposite of the sadness that engulfed him. Vibrant where there was melancholy, decisive where there was hesitation, present where there was emptiness. The marriage was quick before. Gabriel had time to think too much, and once inside the mansion, Renee began her real work. She didn't want to be just the wife of the rich businessman Gabriel Morrison. She wanted to be the only voice he listened to, the only presence that mattered. and Mrs. Eleanor was the biggest obstacle to that. The matriarch had influence over her son, had decades of history and built trust. As long as she was close to Gabriel, Renee would never have total control, so she planned to distance her without violence, without scandal, just with constant silent erosion. Isolation disguised. As care, control disguised as protection. It had almost worked. But now Gabriel was home, attentive, questioning, reconnecting with his mother, and Renee could feel the ground slipping from under her feet. She needed to act. Fast. That night, at dinner, Renee was all charm and submission. She apologized, claimed to have been misunderstood, said that all her actions were motivated by a genuine desire to care for Mrs. Eleanor. Tears welled in her eyes as she spoke of how she felt misunderstood, rejected, attacked. Gabriel listened in silence, his face unreadable. Mrs. Eleanor, sitting at the head of the table for the first time in months, also remained silent, but her tired eyes revealed disbelief. "I want to believe you, Renee," Gabriel finally said, "but I need time to process all this, and I need you to respect the boundaries I will set from now on. My mother gets her voice back in this house. Her decisions will be respected. Is that clear?" Renee nodded, her docile smile not reaching her eyes. "Perfectly clear, darling." But inside she seethed. No one would take away what she had conquered. If Gabriel thought he could simply undo years of work, he was very mistaken. Renee played a long game and still had cards up her sleeve. In the kitchen, Mary Grace was cleaning the dinner dishes when she heard footsteps. Renee appeared at the door, her face transformed into a mask of coldness. "You talk too much, Mary." "I only told the truth, madam." "The truth," Renee laughed without humor, "is relative, and you chose the wrong side." "I didn't choose any side. I chose to do what was right." Renee approached, her voice low and menacing. "Be careful, Mary. People who make too much noise sometimes end up voiceless. It would be a shame for you to lose this job. You wouldn't have many options in the market at your age." Mary Grace held her gaze, even with fear chilling her skin. "I'd rather sleep peacefully being unemployed than well-employed being an accomplice to evil." Renee turned and left, leaving Mary trembling but firm in her decision. The battle for the soul of that house was far from over, and everyone knew it. The question was who would emerge victorious when the last move was made. The following weeks brought a fragile peace to the Belgravia mansion. Gabriel drastically reduced his travels, delegating more responsibilities to his trusted partners. For the first time in years, he chose to be present. He had breakfast with Mrs. Eleanor, listened to her opinions on business, and restored the routine that existed before everything fell apart. Mrs. Eleanor slowly blossomed like a parched plant receiving water after a long drought. Color returned to her face, a sparkle to her eyes. She began to come down for meals, to circulate through the house, to reclaim her presence in spaces that had become hostile territory. But Renee had not given up. She had merely changed tactics. If direct confrontation had weakened her, she would use subtlety and time. She became a model of an understanding wife, always solicitous, always helpful. She feigned genuine interest in Mrs. Eleanor's well-being, offered help that was promptly refused, but which in Gabriel's eyes seemed sincere. She planted doubts with mastery. Casual comments about Mrs. Eleanor being forgetful, about confusing dates, about repeating stories, subtle suggestions that perhaps age was taking its toll in ways that should be carefully monitored with specialized medical care. Gabriel, concerned about his mother after everything that had happened, began to pay attention. And the more he paid attention, the more he noticed small lapses that Renee masterfully amplified. A cup left in the living room, forgotten. A conversation where Mrs. Eleanor mentioned having spoken to someone Gabriel knew hadn't visited the house that week. These were careful traps. The cup was strategically placed by Renee when no one was looking. Information about visits was distorted in Renee's conversations with Gabriel, but the effect was devastating, planting the seed of doubt. "Is my mother really okay?" Gabriel confided to Renee one night when they were alone in the office. "I've noticed some strange things." Renee held his hands, her expression of concern perfectly calibrated. "Darling, I didn't want to alarm you, but I've noticed too. Perhaps we should consult a specialist, someone who can assess if there's anything beyond stress." Do you think it could be something serious? I don't know, love, but it's better to prevent, isn't it? We do this out of love for her. Gabriel nodded, convinced that the concern was genuine. He didn't realize he was being manipulated again, that each piece was precisely positioned to achieve Renee's goal, to remove Mrs. Eleanor under the pretext of medical care. But there was someone who saw everything with crystal clarity. Mary Grace watched, silent but attentive. She noticed when Renee moved small objects to later comment that Mrs. Eleanor had forgotten or misplaced them. She saw when Renee interrupted conversations to later report distorted versions to Gabriel. Mary knew she had to act, but she was afraid. She had been threatened once, and although Gabriel was present now, Renee was dangerously intelligent. If Mary accused without concrete evidence, it would just be her word against her employers. And who would believe the housekeeper against the wife? It was then that Mary made a decision. She would start documenting everything. She wrote down times, conversations, suspicious actions. She kept everything in a small notebook hidden at the back of her cupboard in the pantry. Each page was evidence, each record a protection, not only for Mrs. Eleanor but for herself. One night Mary witnessed something that chilled her to the bone. It was almost 2 a.m, and she had come down for water, having woken up thirsty. Passing by the corridor leading to the office, she saw a light on under the door. She approached silently and heard voices. Renee was on the phone. "I need more time." Her voice was tense, different from the melodious tone she used with Gabriel. "He's starting to trust me again, but the old woman is in the way. I need to remove her without raising suspicion." Mary held her breath, her heart pounding. "No, I can't do anything drastic," Renee continued, "but if I can convince him that she needs specialized care, a clinic, then we'll have the house free, and once she's out, it will be easy to prolong her stay indefinitely." Silence as the person on the other end spoke. "Of course, I know the risks, but what's at stake is worth it. This mansion, the businesses, everything can be ours if we play it right. Gabriel is predictable, sentimental. As long as I appear to be taking care of his mother, he'll let me do whatever is necessary." Mary backed away from the door with trembling steps, wanting to run but forcing herself to remain calm. She climbed the stairs slowly, each step an eternity, until she reached her small room on the 3rd floor. Only when she closed the door and turned the key did she allow the terror to engulf her. Renee was not just manipulating. She was planning to permanently remove Mrs. Eleanor, sending her to some institution under false medical pretenses, and from what Mary had heard, someone else was involved, an accomplice helping with the plans. Mary needed to tell Gabriel, but how to do it without putting herself in danger? If Renee found out she had been overheard, there would be no limits to what she could do. For days, Mary carried the weight of that secret, watching Renee act with her false normalcy, seeing Gabriel slowly being convinced that his mother needed specialized help. Dr. Arthur had been replaced by a new doctor, recommended by Renee, who curiously agreed with all her concerns about Mrs. Eleanor's mental state. The net was closing again, and this time in a more sophisticated way, harder to combat. Renee had learned from her previous mistakes and was now using Gabriel's own insecurities as a weapon. Then something happened that would change everything. One rainy Thursday afternoon, Gabriel received a call from an old college friend, a lawyer specializing in family law. "Gabriel, I need to talk to you about something delicate," the friend said, his voice serious. "It has come to my knowledge that your wife has been consulting lawyers specialized in guardianship. Did you know about this?" Gabriel felt his blood run cold. "Guardianship? What are you talking about?" "Guardianship of individuals deemed incapable of managing their own lives, usually used in cases of severe dementia, serious mental problems. The person loses legal autonomy, and a guardian assumes all decisions." "Why would Renee be consulting about that?" "I don't know, my friend, but I thought you should know. If this involves your mother, as I suspect, I suggest you be careful. Guardianship proceedings can be used abusively." Gabriel hung up the phone with trembling hands. Guardianship. Renee was planning to strip his mother of her legal autonomy, officially declare her incapacitated. With that, she could institutionalize Mrs. Eleanor without her being able to protest, without anyone being able to legally question her. The revelation was like a punch to the gut. All the pieces fell into place. The subtle manipulation, the swapped doctors, the insinuations about memory problems. Everything was part of a larger, more sinister plan than Gabriel had imagined. He needed to act. Fast. But he needed proof. Something concrete he could use to protect his mother and definitively expose Renee. It was no longer enough to believe, it was necessary to prove. That night, Gabriel feigned normalcy during dinner, but his mind worked frantically. He observed Renee with new eyes, seeing beyond the mask of concern and care. How could he have been so blind for so long? How could he have allowed that woman to almost destroy what was left of his family? After everyone had gone to sleep, Gabriel quietly went down to the office. If Renee was planning something so elaborate, there must be traces, calls, documents, some evidence. He began to search, careful not to leave signs of his investigation. And so it was, in the dimness of the office lit only by the desk lamp, that Gabriel began to unravel the true extent of the web Renee had woven, and he realized, with growing horror, that he was fighting against something much larger and more dangerous than he had imagined. Gabriel spent the dawn meticulously searching the office. In a locked drawer, whose key he found hidden behind a picture frame, he discovered a folder full of documents that made him nauseous. Medical consultations with professionals he had never met, psychiatric reports about his mother based on observations that seemed exaggerated or simply false, and most disturbing, a draft petition for guardianship already partially filled out. But what truly shocked Gabriel was a contract. A promise of sale for the mansion dated 2 months ago, signed only by Renee. The document had no legal value since the property was in Mrs. Eleanor and Gabriel's names, but it revealed her intentions. Renee was already negotiating the future, already planning to profit from something that didn't even belong to her. There were also bank records, transactions Gabriel was unaware of. Renee had transferred significant amounts from the couple's joint accounts to personal accounts. Not enough to be immediately obvious, but over 3 years it amounted to an obscene sum. Gabriel photographed each document with his cell phone, his hands trembling with contained rage. He now had concrete proof not only of psychological manipulation, but of financial crimes. Renee was not just a controlling wife. She was a sophisticated swindler, meticulously planning to strip the Morrison family of their assets and dignity. When the sun began to rise on the horizon, Gabriel put everything back exactly as it was and locked the drawer. He couldn't act precipitously. Renee was intelligent and slippery. If he confronted her now without having all his bases covered, she could escape, or worse, accelerate her plans against Mrs. Eleanor. He needed professional help. He called his personal lawyer, Dr. Carter, and scheduled an urgent meeting for that morning. Then he went to check on his mother, who was sleeping peacefully in her room. The sight of her finally at peace, without the fear and tension she had carried for so long, renewed Gabriel's determination. He would not allow Renee to hurt her ever again. In the kitchen, he found Mary Grace preparing breakfast. She greeted him with a nod, but Gabriel noticed the tension in her shoulders, the way her eyes darted away. "Mary, do you know something I should know?" he asked directly. The housekeeper hesitated, her hands stopping mid-movement of cutting fruit. "Mr. Morrison, there's something I need to tell you, but I'm afraid." "You can speak. I guarantee you'll be protected, no matter what it is." It was like opening the floodgates of a dam. Mary recounted the phone conversation she had overheard, the veiled threats she had received, all the small cruelties she had witnessed over the past few years, but had been too afraid to report. She brought the little notebook where she had written everything down, pages and pages of meticulous observations. Gabriel read with a heavy heart. Each entry was a stab, evidence of how he had failed to protect both his mother and the people who worked loyally for the family. Mary had risked her job, her security, to keep that record. Her courage deserved to be honored. "Mary, you did the right thing, and I promise you this will end today." At 9 in the morning, Gabriel was in Dr. Carter's office, presenting all the documentation. The lawyer, a 60-year-old man with decades of experience, analyzed everything with an increasingly grave expression. "Gabriel, this is serious. We have fraud, embezzlement, falsification of documents, attempted wrongful guardianship. Your wife could face criminal charges for all of this." "I don't want criminal proceedings," Gabriel replied. "I don't want scandal or publicity. I just want her out of my life and my mother's life without being able to harm us anymore. Then we need an agreement, a separation with very clear terms and a waiver of any rights to the family, assets. In return, you won't press criminal charges. Will she accept that? If the alternative is prison, she will." Gabriel nodded. As Dr. Carter began to prepare the necessary documentation, Gabriel called home and asked Renee to come to the lawyer's office at 2 in the afternoon, saying they needed to discuss important property matters. She readily accepted, probably thinking that Gabriel was finally taking the steps she had been suggesting regarding his mother's guardianship. But when Renee arrived at the elegant office on Regent Street and saw the expressions of Gabriel and the lawyer, she understood that the cards had changed. "What is this?" she asked, trying to keep her tone light but unable to hide her tension. "Sit down, Renee." Gabriel indicated the chair opposite Dr. Carter's large desk. "I prefer to stand." "Then stand." Dr. Carter handed her a folder. "There you will find all the evidence of 3 years of fraud, manipulation, and attempted wrongful guardianship of my mother. There are financial documents showing diversions, there are testimonies, there is your own draft judicial petition." Renee opened the folder with hands that trembled slightly. As she read, the color drained from her face. "This proves nothing." She tried, but her voice faltered. "It proves enough for criminal proceedings that could result in years in prison," Dr. Carter calmly intervened. "Embezzlement, fraud, falsification of documents, abuse of a vulnerable person. The list is long, and each item has solid evidence." Gabriel leaned forward, his eyes fixed on Renee. "But I don't want a scandal. I don't want to drag my family's name through courts and newspapers. So I'm offering you a way out. You sign these separation documents, giving up any right to the family assets. You commit to never approaching me or my mother again, and in return I won't press criminal charges." "You can't do this," Renee exploded, the mask finally falling completely. "I'm your wife. I have rights." "You gave up your rights when you decided to steal and manipulate," Gabriel replied with a cold voice. "You have 2 choices. Sign now and walk away free but with nothing, or refuse and we'll see each other in criminal court." Renee looked from Gabriel to the lawyer, searching for some loophole, some way out. She found none. Slowly, the reality of defeat settled upon her. Years of planning, of careful manipulation, all crumbling in a matter of hours. "Where will I stay? How much will I get?" she asked, her voice small now. "You'll get exactly what you brought into this marriage." "Nothing," Gabriel replied. "You have 24 hours to leave the mansion. You can take your clothes and personal belongings. Everything else stays. This is inhumane. Inhumane is what you did to a 70-year-old woman, locking her in a forgotten room in her own house. Inhumane is stealing from someone who trusted you. Inhumane is planning to institutionalize a healthy person just to get her money." Renee closed her eyes, tears finally streaming. They were not tears of regret, Gabriel knew, but of frustration at having been caught. Still, a part of him, the part that had once believed he loved her, felt a pang of something he couldn't name. Pity, perhaps, or just sadness for the waste of everything. "I'll sign," she finally murmured. Dr. Carter pushed the documents and a pen. Renee signed with quick scribbles, without reading the details. It no longer mattered. She had lost the game, and knew it. "You have until 2 tomorrow afternoon to leave the house," Gabriel said. "After that, if you're still there, I'll call." "The police!" Renee grabbed her purse and left without looking back. Her heels echoed down the corridor until they disappeared into the elevator. Gabriel sank into the chair, exhausted. It was over, at least that part. "You did the right thing," Dr. Carter said, placing a supportive hand on his shoulder. "You protected your mother and prevented something worse. Why do I feel so empty then? Because marriage, even a bad one, is a loss, and realizing you were deceived for so long hurts. But that pain will pass. The important thing is that Mrs. Eleanor is safe now." Gabriel nodded. He stood up, thanked the lawyer, and stepped out into the sunny London afternoon. He needed to go home. He needed to hug his mother and ensure everything would be all right. For the first time in years, he believed it would be. When Gabriel arrived home, afternoon was turning into evening. The Belgravia mansion seemed different, as if the very structure knew something crucial had changed. He found Mrs. Eleanor in the living room, leafing through an old photo album. Seeing him enter, she looked up and smiled, but the smile wavered as she noticed his expression. "Has something happened?" she asked, closing the album. Gabriel sat beside her, taking her hands. "Renee is leaving, Mother, for good. I discovered everything she was planning and gave her an ultimatum. Tomorrow she leaves this house and our lives." He expected to see relief on his mother's face, perhaps even joy, but what he saw was something more complex. Mrs. Eleanor closed her eyes for a long moment, and when she opened them again, there were tears. "Son, it's not that I wanted to keep suffering, but part of me feels sadness for you. I know there was something real at the beginning before she revealed who she truly was." Gabriel hugged his mother, feeling his own chest tighten. "Yes, there was. Or at least I believed there was. But what matters now is to start over, to recover what we lost. And we will, Gabriel. We always do." That night, the two dined together on the veranda overlooking the garden, something they hadn't done in years. They talked about everything and nothing, recovering the intimacy that had been corroded by time and Renee's interference. Mary Grace served the meal with a genuine smile, relieved to see the house finally breathing again. The next day, promptly at noon, a moving truck parked in front of the mansion. Renee coldly supervised as men loaded suitcases and boxes with her clothes and personal belongings. She avoided looking at Gabriel or Mrs. Eleanor, who watched from the living room. When everything was loaded, Renee approached one last time. Her face was perfectly made up. There was no sign of vulnerability, only coldness. "I hope you'll be happy," she said, her tone laced with poorly disguised bitterness. Gabriel didn't respond. There was nothing to say. Renee turned and got into the waiting car, disappearing through the gate without looking back. "It's over," Mrs. Eleanor murmured beside her son. "It's over," he confirmed. But ending that chapter was only the first step. The true journey was reconstruction. In the following days, Gabriel systematically began to undo all the changes Renee had imposed. The old paintings returned to the walls, family photos reappeared in the frames, furniture with history was rescued from storage. Mrs. Eleanor watched each transformation with growing emotion. It was as if the house was recovering its soul piece by piece. But there was something that still needed to be resolved, a deeper issue, that Gabriel carried like a weight. One morning he found his mother watering the plants in the garden and sat beside her on the stone bench under the jabuticaba tree. "Mother, I need to apologize. Truly." Mrs. Eleanor put down the watering can. "For what, son?" "For running away. After I lost Julia and our baby, I ran from the pain. I immersed myself in work, in travel, in anything that allowed me not to feel, and in the process, I abandoned you. I left a void that Renee filled with poison. Gabriel, you were suffering. No one can blame you for that. But I could have suffered here with you. I could have sought solace in family instead of running from it. If I had stayed, had paid attention, Renee would never have been able to do what she did." Mrs. Eleanor held her son's face in her hands. "Look at me. What happened, happened. We cannot change the past, but we can choose how we will live from now on. And you have already proven that you chose to stay, chose to be present. That is what matters. I swear I won't disappear again, Mother. And I swear I won't let them make me invisible ever again. I've learned that I need to fight for my own voice, even when it's difficult." They embraced under the shadow of the tree that had witnessed the entire history of that family, and for the first time in years, both felt genuine peace. Weeks turned into months. The Belgravia mansion vibrated with life again. Mrs. Eleanor resumed her social routine, reconnected with friends Renee had alienated, and actively participated again in decisions about the house. Gabriel permanently reduced his work commitments, delegating more and spending more time at home. He also started therapy, finally confronting the grief he had buried under layers of denial and escape. He spoke about Julia for the first time in years, about the son he never got to know, about the pain that had shaped his subsequent choices. It was a difficult and painful process, but a necessary one. One afternoon, Dr. Arthur came to visit Mrs. Eleanor for a routine checkup. After finishing the examination, he smiled with satisfaction. "You are doing wonderfully, Mrs. Eleanor. All indicators have improved significantly. Keep it up." When the doctor left, Gabriel asked his mother what she thought about resuming an old hobby. She used to paint before everything fell apart. She had real talent for landscapes and still lifes. Mrs. Eleanor lit up at the suggestion. "Do you really think I should?" "I think you should do everything that makes you happy, Mother." The next day, Gabriel converted one of the third-floor rooms into an art studio. He bought canvases, paints, brushes, a professional easel. When Mrs. Eleanor saw the ready space, with large windows flooding everything with natural light, she cried with joy. She began to paint again, timidly at first, then with growing confidence. The canvases began to accumulate, each one capturing a piece of beauty she saw in the world. It was her way of processing everything she had lived through, of transforming pain into color, silence into expression. Mary Grace was also recognized for her loyalty and courage. Gabriel significantly increased her salary and offered better working conditions. But more importantly, he treated her with the respect she had always deserved. She was not just a housekeeper. She was an essential part of that family. One evening, as Gabriel and Mrs. Eleanor dined, she asked about his future plans. "Will you look for someone?" "Son, try again?" Gabriel reflected before answering. "Eventually, perhaps, but I'm not in a hurry. I first need to understand myself better, learn from the mistakes I made, and when I'm ready, if I am, I want to choose for the right reasons, not to escape pain or fill a void, but because I've found someone who complements my life, not replaces it." "That's very wise." "I learned from the best," he smiled at her. "You and Father always had a real partnership. True love doesn't erase people or memories, it honors and includes." Mrs. Eleanor held her son's hand across the table. "Your father would be proud of the man you've become. I am too." That night, when the house finally slept, Gabriel walked through the familiar corridors. Each room now carried memories, good and bad, but all were part of the story. The mansion was no longer a place to run from, but a home where he chose to stay. He stopped in front of the painting Mrs. Eleanor had recently completed and which now occupied a place of honor on the main living room wall. It was the jabuticaba tree in the garden in full bloom branches, extended like welcoming arms, deep roots nourishing life. In the lower corner she had written a simple but powerful phrase, "It is still time to bloom." And Gabriel realized that was exactly what they were doing. Mother and son together, blooming again after the storm. The house had ceased to be a silent prison to become again what it always should have been, a place of love, respect, and new beginnings. 6 months had passed since René's departure, and the transformation in the Belgravia mansion was palpable. Not just in the walls that now displayed rescued memories, or in the rooms that regained purpose, but mainly in the people who inhabited it. Mrs. Eleanor had become a stronger version of herself. The painting sessions in the studio turned into a true passion, and some of her canvases began to attract attention. A friend suggested she exhibit in a small gallery in the neighborhood, and to Gabriel's surprise, she accepted. The exhibition was modest but significant, marking her complete resumption of autonomy and creativity. Gabriel, in turn, discovered that being present did not mean abandoning his business, but rather reorganizing priorities. He implemented a more balanced work model, delegated responsibilities to competent managers, and began to value quality time over quantity of hours worked. Curiously, his businesses prospered even more with his new approach. But the biggest surprise came from an unexpected place. One Saturday afternoon, while Gabriel was visiting a cultural center where Mrs. Eleanor was participating in a lecture on therapeutic art for seniors, he bumped into a woman at the entrance. She dropped her books, and as both bent down to pick them up, their eyes met. "Excuse me, that was my fault," she said, smiling. I was distracted reviewing my lecture notes. Are you attending the lecture? Too, Gabriel asked, handing her the books. Actually, I'm giving the lecture. I'm Clara, the psychologist responsible for the art therapy program. Gabriel introduced himself and explained that he was the son of one of the participants. Clara lit up. Mrs. Eleanor, of course. She's amazing, one of our stars. Her story inspired our entire program. They talked for a few minutes before the lecture began, and Gabriel felt something he hadn't felt in years. It wasn't overwhelming passion or urgent need, but a genuine connection, a sincere curiosity to get to know this person better. It was different from anything he had felt before. After the lecture, where Mrs. Eleanor shone speaking about how painting had helped her overcome difficult moments, Clara invited Gabriel and his mother for coffee. The afternoon stretched into conversations about art, life, overcoming challenges. Mrs. Eleanor watched her son with a discreet smile, noticing the mutual interest between him and Clara. When they said goodbye, Clara gave her card to Gabriel. If you want to talk more about the program or anything else, you can call me. Gabriel carefully put the card away. I will call. On the way back home, Mrs. Eleanor commented, She seems like a good person. She does, Gabriel agreed. But I'm not in a hurry, Mother. I want to do things differently this time. And you are, son. Just recognizing that shows how much you've changed. In the following weeks, Gabriel and Clara began to meet occasionally. Coffees turned into walks in the park, conversations that extended into the evening. Gabriel formally introduced her to his mother, who received her with genuine warmth. There was no rush to define what it was, they just allowed it to develop naturally. Clara was the opposite of what Renee had been. Where Renee sought to control, Clara valued independence. Where Renee manipulated, Clara communicated with transparency. Where Renee tried to erase the past, Clara respected the stories that shaped people. One day, sitting in the mansion's garden, Clara asked about Julia. She was the first person other than his therapist whom Gabriel allowed to ask that question, and for the first time, he was able to speak without paralyzing pain. She was my complementary opposite, Gabriel said, observing the jabuticaba trees. I was too serious, she brought lightness. I planned every step, she lived in the moment. Losing her and our son was like losing a part of myself. And Renee? Clara asked gently. Gabriel took a deep breath. She was a mistake born of desperation. I wanted to fill the void instead of processing it. I paid dearly for it, and worse, I made my mother pay too. But you realized, corrected, confronted, that counts for a lot. I'm trying to do better now. Clara smiled, taking his hand. I know. It's one of the things I admire most about you. That night, Mrs. Eleanor and Gabriel dined together, as they had every night in recent months. Routine had settled into something comfortable and meaningful. As they ate, Mrs. Eleanor shared news. I received an invitation today, she said with a sparkle in her eyes. An art gallery wants to represent my work permanently. Nothing grand, but it means I can continue exhibiting and perhaps even selling some pieces. Mother, that's wonderful. Gabriel hugged her. I'm so proud of you. It was you who gave me this opportunity, setting up the studio, encouraging me. No, Mother, you always had that talent. I just removed the obstacles that prevented you from shining. Mrs. Eleanor smiled with tears in her eyes. No, son, during those months locked in the East Wing, I thought my life was over, that there was no more purpose, no more joy, no more future. I was wrong. Sometimes we need to go through the deepest darkness to understand that we are still capable of finding light. And you found it, Mother, we found it. We found it together. Months continued to pass, bringing small joys and great transformations. Gabriel and Clara made their relationship official, but without rushing into marriage or major commitments. They were building something solid on foundations of respect and true communication. Mary. Grace saw her 3 children graduate from high school, and Gabriel made a point of being present at the graduations, helping financially so they could continue their studies. The housekeeper had become an inseparable part of that family and was treated as such. The Belgravia mansion, which had once been the scene of so much pain and manipulation, had transformed once again into a true home. The doors were open to friends and family. The table always had room for one more. Laughter echoed through the corridors that for so long had housed only heavy silences. One sunny Sunday afternoon, almost a year after René's departure, Gabriel found his mother in the garden. She was painting the landscape in front of her, capturing the vibrant colors of the flowers she herself had cultivated. He sat beside her in silence, just observing. "Do you know what I learned this year?" Mrs. Eleanor said without taking her eyes off the canvas. "I learned that it's never too late to start over. That dignity doesn't come from others recognizing our worth, but from us claiming it ourselves. And that true love doesn't diminish anyone." Gabriel nodded. "I learned that being present is the greatest demonstration of love I can give, that running from pain only multiplies it, and that forgiveness, true forgiveness, is not just apologizing, but changing the attitudes that caused the harm." They stayed like that for a while, mother and son reunited by the shared experience of almost losing each other, now stronger precisely because they had weathered the storm together. When the sun began to set, painting the sky in oranges and pinks, Mrs. Eleanor finished the last brushstroke on her canvas. It was the view of the mansion from the garden, but not just the physical structure. She had captured the essence of home, the feeling of belonging and security that emanated from those walls when inhabited by genuine love. "It's perfect, Mother," Gabriel murmured, "like our life should have been from the beginning, and finally is." They entered the house together, leaving behind not only the fading afternoon, but also the ghosts of the past that no longer held power over them. The mansion greeted them with its welcoming quietude, so different from the oppressive silence that had once reigned there. Gabriel looked around, seeing the house through new eyes. Every object had history and purpose. Every room breathed life. Every corner echoed with promises of futures yet to be written. That house, built by generations of the Morrison family with sweat and love, had finally returned to what it always should have been, not a gilded cage where souls were erased, but a sanctuary where they could flourish. And as the lights came on one by one, illuminating the corridors and rooms, Gabriel understood the most important lesson of all, that to love is not to control, not to erase, not to replace. To love is to allow the other to be fully who they are, to be present even when it is difficult, to rebuild when one has failed, and above all that it is never, absolutely never, too late to do what is right, to restore dignity to those who have been silenced, to transform an empty house into a pulsating home of life. Dear listeners, we hope that the story of Gabriel and Mrs. Eleanor has touched your hearts and made you reflect on the importance of presence, respect, and dignity in family relationships. If this narrative has moved you, we invite you to subscribe to our channel, where we daily bring equally engaging stories that explore the complexity of human relationships and the challenges of everyday life. Don't forget to leave your like on this video, as every gesture of support encourages us to continue bringing content that makes a difference. And in the comments, we want to know, have you ever witnessed or experienced situations of emotional neglect in your family? How did you deal with it? Share your experiences with us, because every story matters and can help someone going through a similar situation. Together we build a community of support and reflection. Until the next story.